Let me introduce the panelists. So Kathee from BoomBit, Falko from flaregames, Matt from Yoda One Games, Vincent from Falafel Games, Anthony from Jump Gaming, and Deborah from Oculus. So this is a Ask Me Anything session. So the main idea of this is that all the audience have the questions to the publishers and distributors. So we will be happy to reply all your questions during the next hour. So yeah, if you have a question, just raise the hand and we will continue replying. So can you say like a few words about yourself? There's two things that you want everyone to remember about you. Yep, Kathee, you can start.
Two things to remember about me. I don't even know. I do monetization. I've been working in monetization since 1999. Started at CNET Networks. Secondly, I used to be a snowboard instructor part-time while I was monetizing ads and games and things like that for 8 years at Vail. That's it.
Yeah, Falko from flaregames. We're a mobile-only, free-to-play only publisher based out of Germany. Although we're based in Germany, we're actually trying to be a very global company releasing games everywhere.
Matt from Yoda One Games. We do PC and mobile publishing in China, as well as help a bunch of indie developers on the global side with publishing.
Hi, I'm Vincent. I run Falafel Games. We are a publisher for mobile games, and we target the Middle East.
I'm Anthony from Jump. We're an on-demand, multi-platform game subscription service that's pretty new. We just launched last year, and fun fact about me is I actually started as an indie developer, wasn't very good at it, and decided to move over into the publishing and distribution side.
Hello, I'm Deborah. I'm with Oculus, part of the developer strategy group. So we're here to basically support you and your games from the very beginning, even from concept phase all the way out to launch. So we're very open, very available, and looking forward to talking to everybody. Fun fact about me, I actually didn't start in games, but I've played and loved games since I could walk. So it's been great to sort of take all the key strengths from other areas that I was in before, from operations to finance to sales to tech. And then bring it over here. Really excited to be here, and also a huge Star Wars geek.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. Okay. Okay, so does anyone have questions to our publishers and distributors? Raise your hand. Yeah, there is the first question. Oh, you just say
That's
hi.
Danny from our team. He's just messing with me.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Yar. I'm from a very small company from Ukraine, and we're doing puzzle game adventure. And my question is how to sell puzzle game, because right now all publishers trying to actually selling games like free to play, in-game purchase and everything, and our game not suitable for that. Our game retail price, so you will buy game with all levels, but because we're very small indie and we don't know how to sell our game. So my question, how to sell puzzle adventure game without in-game purchase, just with retail price?
So the question is how to sell the games, how to publish the game without a publisher. I actually had it in my list. A lot of developers through social media asked me that. So who wants to start? I think Matt wants to start. So yeah, in which situation it is better for a developer to publish the game without a publisher?
Okay, of course we don't want to tell you not to publish without us, but I feel there are some situations where the developer ends up in a better situation if they publish on their own. And surprisingly enough, it's those situations where the game does extremely well. So if you want to go riskier and hope that you have a lesser chance of doing extremely much better than doing okay, then it's better to go on your own, because the economics of publisher-developer relationship, when they're based on revenue share, which is mostly the case, make it in a way that the publisher doesn't have enough UA budget to reinvest when they have to give you a percentage. Whereas when you're only taking a fixed cost as a developer on your own, you end up with much more UA to reinvest. Therefore, if if we compare two games, one with no revenue share and the other with revenue share, that have similar ROI profiles, then the one without revenue share would do much better, although it's the same unit economics.
Yeah, but to add to that a little bit, if you're gonna go down that road, be ready to significantly scale up your company, and that is something you want to do. That you want to have an in-house user acquisition team. That you will have to have a whole team just to take care of that, and your goal has to be build the company towards that. You're ready for that, and not just say like, oh, we have a bunch of users. What are we gonna do with that now? It's like you have to plan ahead, and not just say, okay, we're successful now and we see where it goes. You have to be ready to jump on that and like go the extra mile afterwards.
And to jump on both of them is that if you do like launch globally, it's going to be much more difficult for you to contact a publisher and say, hey, here's my game, I did really well, now help me. You know, well, you just kind of screwed up one big thing you launched globally. So, and that doesn't help you get the featuring that you deserve for such a great game. A publisher can help you do that and get the featuring that you deserve. And if you want to try it on your own, try a little bit, like a little bit of countries. Like I'm sure you don't have a huge like pocket of money for marketing, so go ahead and try a few countries and see how it works out for you, and tweak the game if you can. And then if it's great and you ran out of money, contact a publisher.
So Kathee, now you're like BoomBit as a publisher, but you started as a developer, right?
Correct.
So
yeah.
why did you decide to publish a game yourself, not with a publisher then?
Oh, well, we lucked out. Okay, so the secret behind BoomBit, which we're announcing here today, is that we are also other developer accounts. We started making mobile games in 2012. So when you make a game in 2012 and you actually launched it, you are automatically like practically a millionaire, right? So without like much UA, you're like your game is out there, you know, and you've figured out the store and you figured out how to make a game for mobile. So we have another developer account called Play With Games. We do parking and driving simulation games, and all that money that we've made from that game helped us start BoomBit, which meant we just shifted our attention to BoomBit. So we didn't have the pain and strain that most people would have today, where you can't just make a great game and put it in the store and like all of a sudden make a lot of money. You need help. You need expertise.
I also think your game is Polecats or Molecats. Is that you guys? Yeah. I remember you guys.
Yeah, it's a game Molecats had reworked.
Yeah. Awesome title. So I think that it really depends on what regions you're really looking for. Premium games are obviously very difficult to do in China. There are a lot of platforms that don't support them, both on the PC and the mobile side. So I think that, I mean, on the PC side, you have a growing market, but on the mobile side, it's really tricky. We can't really monetize games on Android without having to put in a few free-to-play mechanics of our own in there. And we've definitely hit mixed successes with this. So, I mean, really think about the regions you're looking for publishing for. I mean, sometimes we encourage developers to kind of take the geo-test route, launch on a few markets, see what the metrics look like, and then you'll find publishers. If you have the good metrics, you'll find publishers chasing you guys. So it really depends on what you're really targeting with your business model.
So your advice is actually to find a publisher for Molecats.
Yeah, we're still looking at it, actually.
But have you ever, like, you travel a lot and you see like thousands of games during the year. Have you seen the games that, like, oh, it's such an awesome game, but I think you will do better without a publisher? So what kind of games are they?
I mean, off the top of my head, I can't name one right this second, but I can definitely mull on that. But it definitely happens. I mean, there are times when when it's very clear a development team doesn't need a publisher. Oftentimes, because we get tapped a lot for the China side, it doesn't happen as often for us. But so I'm sure other publishers can speak to it better. But there are definitely times where I've been approached by maybe a middle-sized team talking about doing a global plus China deal, when I maybe talk them out of the global side and say, look, you guys can probably do global on your own. Let's just talk China.
Yeah, I think publishers come in all forms and sizes. So it really depends, and each publisher has their own reason why it shouldn't be, why the developer shouldn't work with them. In our case, I notice a lot of situations where the game would only work if it's like one global server, and it's more casual. It needs global player liquidity, and as a regionally focused publisher, there's no fit. So because publishers are different, they have different reasons why a game would not be a fit. So in my case, if it's a game that needs very high volumes of players to monetize well, whereas I'm focused on very high ARPU territories but lower volumes to monetize well, then it's off the bat a bad fit.
Thank you.
Yes, so most of the time when developers are interested in working with publishers, it's because you guys have resources, funding for development, UA, etc. So at some point for most developers, it just becomes, you know, how you can help in terms of helping me to market and distribute my game, right? So I guess what I'm more interested in is, as a publisher, other than just typical UA, what are some strategies that you guys are looking into, or new tactics or new trends that you are seeing as a publisher, or how are you guys trying to differentiate yourselves as publishers, aside from just purely marketing spend? What do you see out there in the market?
Yeah, so for us, we have a couple of other things that we do beyond just providing money for user acquisition. On the one side, we try to connect the teams we're working with amongst each other, and we have like knowledge databases for all the teams to share ideas and experiences. And we also do a little bit of development work on like a platform that we're doing in-house, things like push notifications or handling chargebacks from the stores, stuff that you want to have in every game, but you don't want every developer to spend time working on them. So to have like a little bit of a technical set that helps you out as well. And then sometimes it's very individual. Some developers want help on the design side, maybe like monetization systems, people that are experienced in designing these systems and figuring out flaws in them before you actually go live. And so we try to have a more like a bigger service packet around it, and things that you don't think about as a developer. Like if you market your game, it comes with how do you present that game, maybe choose a different title, what kind of icons are you using, and ABCD testing, all of these kind of things. So we're helping with a lot of that as well.
By the way, some of the developers we work with have much more financial resources than us. Then they do give us the rights to their titles. So there is some reasons behind that. And of course I can tell you expertise, but everybody wants to, nobody wants to say we have no expertise. And I can tell you, you know, we will help. Most people help, but there are some things that a publisher necessarily has that a developer doesn't, and it's usually the fact that to make a game, you're probably, you know, fully focused on it, and it takes you, I don't know, maybe 15 people over 15 months, and 15 months, or let's say 6 months, in this market are brutal. The changes that happen on the user acquisition side, on the promotion, on the marketing side, are dramatic. While you're developing your game, the publisher is dancing with other brides and marketing other games and fighting in the trenches of publishing and adapting to all these changes. So they're, you know, more up to date to what needs to be done, and, you know, with all the metrics in the market, necessarily more up to date than a developer. So that would, I think, is generally speaking a good thing to that publishers have and developers don't. Now you have some publishers, you know, that have certain particular expertise, like we focus on the Middle East. We try to make a game that is so Middle Eastern that it only works in the Middle East, because nobody wants to be there, so we're the only ones there. So this is also like an ingredient that we put that, so for example, flaregames would absolutely don't want to put this. So it is an ingredient that even other publishers maybe don't want to have. And this is what you want to look at. You know, that strategic and that focus that a publisher offers, that exclusive focus that a publisher can offer.
That's actually really nice that you mentioned that. So I met a lot of developers through the year. And the main question that developers have is how to choose the right publisher. So what metrics they should pay attention to, and what question should they ask to actually choose the right publisher?
I mean, I think that you'll hear this from most publishers, but we typically, the first metric that we look at when, I mean, we also because we plan on having these partners for a long time, we want to make sure we're doing our background research. So before actually inking anything, we'll do some pretty big research in it. But the first thing is really retention metrics, and I think that comes as no shock to a lot of people here. Every genre has their own kind of benchmarks that you should try and hit, so I don't want to go like specific with anyone, but on the casual side, you're definitely looking at higher day 1 and day 7s. And then on the day 30, day 14 for your more mid-core titles, you want to see very consistent player base there. But then we look at conversion. So we already have this player base. We got the players coming back to the game. Well, how well do we convert them to monetized players? So that's the second most important metric for us to look at. And the third is really, well, how much are these players worth, each player worth, and it's LTV. And those are kind of the three things that we look at when we're boiling it all down to 3 metrics. And obviously we'll go deeper when we do further projections as we get into deal talks, but those are the first 3 that we.
Yeah, and on the premium side a little bit, we're more of an end-of-life cycle service. So once your games have already run their premium sales cycles and you're looking for new things to do beyond bundles or discounts and Steam sales, we're a great place to bring your game as a subscription where you earn revenue based on playtime. And the 3 things that we look for in premium titles specifically is, has it sold a lot of copies? Just is it a runaway hit seller? Is it rated highly? So was it just highly regarded by players in general? Or has it won any awards? And those are pretty much a good way for us to cut out a lot of the shovelware that you'll see that's just burying platforms like Steam right now. But beyond that, what we do is we also look kind of subjectively at the content that comes through as well to see if it's a fit for our particular audience, which is right now indie gamers. And as we grow, it'll be a much broader audience as well. But it's mostly about finding the fit for the platform or for the publisher from either perspective. So it's a fit for you guys looking to make sure that it's something that we want to work with, but it's also looking at our metrics, because a lot of times we talk about those very publicly, and we want to make sure that you are coming to us knowing that we're a fit for you, and vice versa.
Deborah, do you want to add what actually Oculus looking in the game? So how do you select the games that you invite to be published with Oculus?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the value that our team brings is sort of being able to look at games earlier on before they're ready for launch. So being able to sort of provide feedback earlier on, even as early back as the concept phase. We have a lot of data and a lot of input that we can provide based on the learnings that we've had over the course of nearly 2 years of releasing VR titles. So for us, it's important to work with all of you as early on as possible so that we can provide that feedback and sort of like help set and understand your expectations so that we can then set you up for success. And we encourage all developers to target, the different platforms and whichever suits them best. And ultimately, we want you to be successful so you can go ahead and make more VR games in the future.
Do you want to add something, Falko? So we talk about what you are looking as a publishers and distributors in the games, but how should the developer choose a publisher? So what metrics can you provide the developer and prove like, yeah, I'm the best publisher, publish with me?
Be a little girly about this answer. I'm definitely a numbers person, so you can definitely do your research when you're shopping for publishers. Like you shop for anything, like you shop for a house, because this is like hundreds of thousands to hopefully millions of dollars of a relationship that you're going to have with a publisher. So do your research and then ask questions bounced off that research. But also ask them like who they're going to work with on a day-to-day basis, and whether this is really a partnership or a dictatorship. For us, we really want to do a partnership where you're learning from us and we're learning from you, and so we can grow together and make a great game, and hopefully we make another great game later.
And also just talk to the developers the publishers are already working with. Like you get first-hand experience right from the source, people that have experience with those guys, and see what they like, what they dislike. A publisher should always make sure that their relationships with the developers they had in the past are like a sign of pride they can put out there, and that they're sure they will get good feedback or reviews from those people. And I think every developer will be open to talk to you.
So I think it's like any other, almost any other relationship, commercial relationship, let's say, that you should make sure not to let the publisher just get away with a very good deal for them. It's quite competitive between publishers. So if you make sure the publisher is also taking risk, at least as much risk as you are, it means it's a serious publisher. I've seen a lot of cases like developer friends of ours where the publisher takes no risk, and the developer takes all the risk, probably because you are taking your risk early on, before the publisher already. And then the publisher takes no risk, then it raises some flags. Don't enter a deal where the publisher is not taking any risk. And ask other fellow developers who have worked with that publisher. I found that that is like the best one item of due diligence that needs to be done by developers, is asking other developers who worked with that publisher in particular. Eventually, you should the relationship should evolve beyond revenue share and marketing guarantees and terms and contracts into a relationship of true partnership and trust. So do you have the chemistry? Do you have the communications? Sometimes time zones kill the communications and the partnership. So, you know, look at those softer things for the long term. I think it's really, really important.
I'd say one more thing in the front end of that as you're starting to build these relationships is try to understand your position with them when you're starting to get into negotiations. So if it's an inbound request to publish your game versus you trying to approach them and you're really desperate for it, there's going to be very different negotiating tactics in trying to get the terms that you want. So, and this goes for investors as well as publishers, but try to understand the position that you're in versus the one that they're in, so that you know how you can approach the deal and try to find something that's mutually beneficial where you're both putting up some sort of risk.
Deborah, I'm thrilled that you actually want to see games at the concept level, but if I've got an idea for like a jumping eyeballs game, I'm not really sure that most of you guys want to see that before I've written any code. So about what time is the right time for me to start shopping for a...
Just for the record, stole an idea I just said about jumping eyeballs.
Time to come to you with that idea.
Sure. I mean, I would say that if you, like, we've gotten several things. So, for example, you could be a publisher that is looking at multiple options on the table, so sort of like different ideas. Or you could be a developer who's thinking about, maybe should I do this horror thing or should I do this interactive thing? Should I go for this? And then you have to decide which one to go to. We enjoy having those conversations early on to sort of like help, answer any questions you may have about, hey, what do you see like resonating with people in VR? What do you see people enjoying? What do we need more of? What would we like to see a little bit more of?
Yeah, so I was honestly going to take the opposite stance on this. We see a lot of games at all stages, and we encourage developers to come in early, not quite at concept stage. We like to see at least a vertical slice that we can look at, just so we can get, we can look at plans for metagame later on and stuff like that. But I mean, at least have a vertical minimum viable product to actually work with. So I think it actually depends on what type of game you're creating. So for a casual, very simple game, a simple core game loop is all you need. And actually, for a game like Rodeo Stampede, that's all we saw. I saw one vertical slice of that game. That's all he had was a couple animals running in the Stampede, and he said, okay, well, I have this plan for a zoo after this also. And I'm like, oh, well, there's your retention hook there. There's your metagame. Okay, this can work. Like, you get really excited about it. And I mean, that's when you kind of can take the game further. And same thing with Crossy Road too. I mean, that was only, 2.5 month, 3 month project to dev. They showed us an early build of that. We jumped right in, and it was towards the end of their dev cycle. But as you see that vertical slice, you can see the potential of the game there. And so I do encourage developers to reach out early, but maybe not too early, because I mean, keep in mind that a lot of publishers, especially on the mobile side, we're seeing hundreds of games a month, and easily 100 games. And we'll say no to many of those games, but we'll always try and give feedback when we can to encourage developers in the right direction. But I definitely see your point. I mean, you can't go in too early with a publisher, because it's too early sometimes. It's too early to kind of ink that deal. I mean, if it's a new publisher on the block, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, the one caveat I would add to that is that we as Oculus have a dual, we have a dual function, right? Unlike anybody else here, right? We distribute content, but there are times when we also publish content, right? We do grants at times. So in that case, I would agree with Matt. We would definitely want to see a slice or a prototype to sort of get an idea of what it is and how you want us to come in and help support that. But then on the other side, VR is a unique platform. I feel it's never early enough to sort of talk and help guide whenever we can because of the knowledge that we have. Now, does that mean that we have time for like 1,000 people? No, but there's also, it's a growing community, and it's still early on that we can do this, and we want to do this as a team and bring value to that. So I would say that on both sides. But on the, hey, we would like to see if you can help get our project past that final line. Can I give you an idea? I'd be like, no, I would agree with Matt. We need to see something working to sort of get an idea of what the vision is and the execution.
I think it's a good example of like know your market and know your competition. If you're competing with hundreds of other developers that are further along than you, then of course publishers are in a nice position sometimes, right? And it's but it also within the platform, for example, it's are you doing a build and rate game that has some things that are different, but it bases a lot of it on existing games, then other people are going to have similar concepts. You're competing with them more directly as if you have something really fresh. So if you have a super unique core loop, that might be something you want to contact the publisher with. But if you're basing a lot on existing games, you have so much more competition, and then you'll have to think about like what else is the publisher seeing that might be more interesting to them, or a less risky choice.
That's a good.
I mean, I think if you're wondering if it's the right time to go in or not, what you could try to do is approach the community first and talk to actually gamers and see if what you have is maybe something that they would want to play, even if it's a concept or a small loop with prototype pieces. Sites like GameJolt and others in that neighborhood are really good for just trying to give it a shot. And I know if you're on mobile, it's a little more difficult, but trying to get some friends in front of it to give you honest feedback, I think is really important if you're wondering if it's the right time to go. And then once it's the right time to go, one thing that can really help is the relationship. So if you have a relationship with somebody like Deborah already, she's going to be much more willing to hear a pitch in an earlier stage than if you're a brand new developer trying to come in. So I'd say the newer you are, maybe the slightly later you want to wait, because you don't want to come to them as a brand new developer and say, hey, I have this idea, because they're going to have 100 other real prototypes in front of them, I would say.
So as a developer, we understand the importance of keeping your source code. Like you had developed this game. If you're going to develop it and not just have a concept and actually develop the game, it's your source code. So for us at BoomBit, we want a fully baked out game with full gameplay and hopefully some menu options, so we can see how well your code is and how well you developed the game, because we're not signed on as a partnership, and you can keep your code. Hopefully, as long as you like meet up your end of the bargain. And we'll work together on making that great game.
I was wondering if you're doing a multi-platform launch like PC and mobile, if you could get statistics from GameJolt, and you think that would still be applied to the audience for mobile? Or like, if it's worth getting a publisher for the game, I mean.
Yeah, PC and mobile is a tough one. Is it going to like allow multi-platform between the two? You take your save data and or you play against other players, or is it like a discrete experience, almost like a pocket version? Like what would be?
The specific game I'm asking for is more of like a Fire Emblem strategy game. It's just a release on both is all.
Oh, a double release. Okay. I mean, I think it depends on if it's going to be the exact same game on both. Some of the metrics may translate, but if it's a premium game on both, it's going to be a very different experience on PC than it is going to be on mobile. And I think a lot of these guys could tell you about what premium on mobile would look like. So building an audience on the desktop first as a premium game and then moving into mobile with a pocket edition or something of the sort has worked for certain games. I think going mobile and then to PC would be a very difficult transition, as a lot of developers could tell you. And then a free-to-play game that's across both, I think that the metrics may translate a little better. But again, it's overlapping but different audiences. So it might be, I'm not sure on the...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you've touched on all the right things, I think. As kind of coming from, we just started doing PC publishing about 2 years ago, and I mean, we really treat both things separately. I mean, we taught the same conversation with developers, and that developer could have both a PC and a mobile version. But I mean, sometimes we'll really want the mobile version, or we'll really want the PC version based on the operations, based on the market that we're projecting it's going to target. So I think it really is fair to address them both separately. And I mean, I don't have as much experience, and our team is doesn't have as much experience doing stuff with GameJolt, but I would agree that the metrics are probably not so in line, and you really have to really look at the markets instead of looking at the games.
I think from looking at the metrics of our pipeline of games, the metrics of one title on PC are almost always very different from their performance on mobile. But also, the benchmarks on each are different. And both actual performance and benchmarks depend on the game and the game experience and the game genre. So it really, I mean, there's almost no starting point to answer this question. I would say look at the game, look at the experience. On another hand, we published a game, a strategy game, that was a cross-platform between browser and mobile. And also, the metrics were very different on both platforms. But since, you know, they fed off each other, it was overall a good performance, but it was a strategy game. You know, it kind of fit both. You know, you play on your desktop at work and then on your mobile when you go back home. And that depended on the genre of the game.
I think it also is tricky to price games as well when you're talking mobile and PC. And I think a lot of developers run into that problem when they're taking their premium PC game and trying to bring it to mobile. They don't know what price point to really offer it at, and that kind of creates a little bit more friction with players and your player base, because then you get your player base complaining on Steam that the mobile version is so much cheaper and that guys are getting this content, that content, or whatever, and you see that all the time. And Steam ratings get hurt for it and stuff like that. So definitely take a different approach, like two different strategies, and really.
Yeah, I'd say overall we're not saying don't do it. It's just that it's going to take a pretty specific approach to make sure you're not pissing off one group of players or the other, and making sure it fits what you're looking for. And it takes a pretty unique game to be able to do it, because a PC experience is a sit down and play for an extended period of time kind of play session, and mobile we know is much shorter. So it's got to be the right game and the right approach, I would say.
Hi. So keeping your successful deals in mind, what percentage would you say came to you originally as a cold inbound from the developers themselves versus you guys outbound reaching to them because you thought it was so cool? Which ones tend to be more successful? Is it 50-50? Is it 80% of your outbound kind of, you know, or is it 20% on the inbound?
I'd say that that's a trick question. So I'd say that we get a ton of games come inbound through we have an inquiry portal. We have developers that we maintain contact with all over the world, all different stages of development with the titles. Some are launching new games we've previously been in touch with them through previous games. We have like kind of a general idea of who the talented developers that we've met with are in the past, and we'll always be keeping tabs on those developers to make sure that we know what games are coming out, what cycle they're in development. But I'd say that the ones that come directly into our inquiry portal are not of the greatest quality. Usually the better ones are coming from conferences, from meeting with developers in person, friend kind of introductions and stuff like that. Get that all the time, and I feel like that's actually where the better quality is, where I find. And again, like a lot of developers you may meet early on in their life cycle as a development team, so maybe they're not putting out their best content, but you're looking at kind of the quality behind their work and what they have in the future. So I mean, it's kind of a waiting game with some developers, and some right when you meet them, okay, these guys, I'm going to sign them right now, or these guys, they need to incubate a little bit.
So Matt, how did you reach the most successful games that you have published? So
I think a lot of people agree here that Cross the Road is probably one of our best, most successful games. And that took years of talking to Matt Hall. We were going back and forth with him. He was actually in premium games, Pete Mobile Games. Maybe looked at, I think I saw maybe 6 or 7 titles come out of him, and he had a couple guys working with him. And he switched over to free-to-play, and that was, he reached out to us. We've been in touch with him for countless years, just making sure that we were keeping tabs on him, because we always knew he had a lot of talent behind him. And finally, Crossy Road came across my desk. We played the Unity Online version. I kept messaging him back, and we're like, dude, Matt, this is awesome. I'm still playing. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Trying to collect all the characters, and this is before like that whole gacha mechanic really existed in games. So I mean, I was obsessed with it. I'd say that like it comes through just like a lot of relationship building happens. And
It happens to be the same for us too. So our most successful game is from a developer we had known for 5 years. And I don't know if it was inbound or outbound. I know it was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
Shorter about that.
Yeah, the relationships are really important. I mean, if it's not this game, then the next game it could potentially be. And like we mentioned earlier, just getting your foot in the door so that you can have those conversations earlier on is super important. But that same goes for us as a platform too. I think a lot of the games that we reach out to, obviously outbound, we have very targeted missions, and so we know that the games we're going after are going to be a fit for our audience. So I'd say there's a higher percentage that outbound end up working for us, but we've had some inbound ones that are really incredible. I think Pony Island was submitted to us, and we had not met that guy. We knew of the game, but we hadn't found a good way to get connected to him because introductions really, really matter. And this guy reached out to us and ended up being one of our most popular games on the platform.
And on the VR side, I'll add that a lot of our most successful titles have also been partnerships that we've had with developers for years, earlier on and then later on, sort of also keeping tabs on what they're doing and what they're working on. And by having that door open and having that conversation ongoing, we can sort of work together from the beginning and then sort of be able to more accurately hit their goals, at least from our side as a distributor, and then also on the partner side as well.
One thing though, it's still worth sending those emails, and because that might be the way you make that initial contact. Like even if that game is not for the publisher, you might start this conversation that down the road will make a hit game later on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I ran into my Xbox rep outside that I met 5 years ago when we were a terrible indie studio, and we still have a great relationship, and we're going to have a drink later tonight. So, you know, we submitted a terrible game to her back in 2012, and she thought I was really sweet with a terrible game, and now we're like in a much deeper professional relationship where I can approach her about what we're working on and try to find new projects to work on together. So, yeah, submit the emails, even if it's horrible. It doesn't matter.
So emails and conferences, are there any other ways to reach the publishers? So how do you usually reach by developers?
So I mean, I'll speak a little bit because I've been doing a lot more outbound recently, trying to grow the PC side, and I say that LinkedIn and again relationships are really the two things that I use most. I've done Twitter, I've done Facebook, I've done Instagram. I've literally pinged some of these developers on every platform I can see, and sometimes developers are really hard to reach. Some of those guys that are constantly getting pinged. I mean, we go through similar things that data service providers go through at times. And yeah, I mean, I've done a lot with just seeing who are mutual contacts on LinkedIn. If I know that guy well enough, maybe I'll ask him for an intro. I don't want to pester him too much because you don't want to ask too many intros from one person, but you kind of have to play the field a little bit. But definitely, LinkedIn's easy. I mean, you can get on it and look who you know. So yeah, I encourage that.
I think it goes both ways. So for us reaching out to developers, a lot of them love Twitter DMs, and so we go that direction. Not a lot of them use LinkedIn, but in the other direction, a lot of people trying to get a hold of publishers or platforms will go through LinkedIn. But I'd say by and large, intros or recommendations is the way to go if you can find a way. You know, for us to get to Ed McMillan, it took, I think, 2 or 3 different intros to get to that guy, who we eventually got the end is nigh on the service. So the network really, really helps. But there's always a way to try to find a secondary way to do direct outreach, like a cold outreach.
If you go to conferences, use the conferences, right? My pet peeve is like use the matchmaking system, have a good description of your company, react to messages that are coming in. That's better for everybody involved.
Sure.
On BoomBit.com, you can go into our contact form and just fill it out. Or I'm here. I'm at the Indie Game Prize. But yeah, as everyone said, conferences, emails, everything that you could possibly do. And it is funny because like only one game developer contacted me on the what is it called?
System.
Yeah, and he's not a developer that's part of any game prize. So.
Yeah, we always encourage developers to submit their profiles, but yeah, I hope more and more developers will learn that they need to use pitch and match system to contact during the conference.
So just to leave this conversation in a very hopeful manner, I know inbound is tough, right? What is the fastest or the most, like one example of, you know, a cold developer, you never heard of this person ever before and it just worked? And how quick was that, just so we can be a little bit more hopeful about sending these inbounds to you? Is there a good example?
Wait, can you you're looking for an example of when a kind of cold outreach or
just
something?
a positive story, just so we're sending the emails, we're not so discouraged.
I mean, it definitely we were very good at like using our inquiry portal. We don't ignore it, but it's like Kathee was saying. I mean, just reach out to us. We'll always respond. I mean, it's our job to make sure we're in touch with you guys. I mean, I think that a lot of my relationships are success stories, whether or not we publish the game or not. I mean, I know it's a really lame answer, but I think that we're all just growing our contacts and relationships in the industry. And to meet someone new that reaches out to us, it's exciting for at least me.
But while we don't have anything live or announced where I can talk about it, we get good stuff through the emails, and we sign contracts based on like cold emails that came in, and some games are within that process. Some we at least talk deeper. It like happens frequently. It's not like there's no chance for your game to ever get picked up, and we answer every email, and we usually start at least some kind of relationship with the developer for every email that comes in.
Just thinking, more or less, I think 90% of our pipeline is called inbound, and we process them the same way as relationship based entries into our pipeline, very seriously. We don't have any title that was a hit that came in a very cold way, but we do process them seriously, and we go as far as possible. But also on the flip side, the fastest rejections are on the cold inbound, but not because it's cold inbound, because it's like no fit. Maybe the developer didn't do much research about us, or we were not very clear about what we prefer. So we just, we process it in the first 5 minutes of processing. It's not a good fit. We reject it. Now, it doesn't mean we don't, and maybe, sometimes, in very few cases, we reject without like much feedback. So you end up feeling that, we don't process inbound, but it's not the case. We do process them very seriously.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, if there's spots in the inquiry forums and stuff for extra information, use those spots to provide it. I mean, if it's a download link, I can't tell you how many times where people don't even put their game download link and like, but I'm talking about deeper stuff than that. If you have further plans for developing this game out and you're interested in discussing that, share that with us, and we can use that in our evaluation, because knowing the roadmap of the game will definitely help our decision whether or not we want to publish it. It'd also show how committed you guys are to finding a publisher. I can't tell you how much it annoys me though when a random developer will reach out, say, look at my game, download link, peace. Like, I hate that so much. Like, please say hello. Like, I'm a person too. So.
Yeah, on the VR side, we get a lot of inbound, and we have multiple teams that sort of like work with different pieces of content. So it's usually always very helpful to, the link, as you mentioned, is enormously helpful. Like the first thing I do if someone doesn't give me their link to their studio is I go to Google and I go find it, because I want to learn more about who you are and what you do. So anything from like, yeah, a hello for sure, because we've gotten all sorts of things. A hello with a link, a little bit of what you do and what you're making. Definitely goes a long way for us to sort of like figure out, is that something that my team can help you with on the game side, or is that something where maybe I need to send you over to the experiences team or the studios team, right? So that is also like a huge help.
And a video of your gameplay.
Yeah, definitely video.
Basically, at Casual Connect Singapore, there was a great panel about how to submit games to the Indie Prize. Look at that, because a lot of that is true for submitting games to publishers as well.
And we actually have one of the judges in the hall who was at that panel. So yes, so it's not only for the publishers, it's for any contest, for media, for anyone you can reach. You really need to have a really good pitch, really short one, because those people receive thousands of these applications during, I don't know, a day, months, whatever. Why publishers always feel the need to do the game design job instead of leaving it to game designers, and for studios to have their bad ideas?
I mean, it's never our intention to sign on a game that sucks, so generally we sign on a game because it's a great game, you have great gameplay, but when you work with a publisher, we will integrate analytics, and we'll look at the analytics, we'll look at all the users that we purchase and see what happens. And what might happen is that the gameplay needs a little tweak here and there. So it shouldn't be an insult. It's just what happens when you see the data.
Yeah, one thing that we actually have as an internal little bit of a company motto for this year is stop making games. Because we're a publisher, we're not developers. We want to have that in your hands. You do that better than what we do. What we usually try to do is that we will point out problems usually from the data. So when we see low retention rates or second time conversions or something like that, we'll point that out to you and say that this is a problem for these and these reasons. And then it's, for us, we try to leave it up to the team to fix these problems, right? And that can be you have a great idea or you have a feature plan that will tackle that anyway. But we're always there to offer advice if you need it. So like we have a couple of designers, especially for monetization systems, come to us and then get more information about that, or connect to our other studios. We're happy to introduce you to the guy that made a feature that fixed a problem in another studio, and you can talk to them and like see if that would work for your game as well. But it is definitely dangerous. Some publishers like to do that, to get like too overbearing when it comes to designing features for you, and that is something you should ask developers before you sign on with a publisher that worked with them, if that is the case at that specific publisher.
I think we take a different approach as a platform, and I'm sure Oculus is a lot of the same, where it's for us it's more about optimizing for the platform itself as opposed to making game design tweaks within the game. We may have suggestions based on our feedback or what users tell us, but for the most part we want your game to run as well as possible on our service, and so a lot of the feedback that we give is based on performance and optimization as opposed to like actual game design changes.
Yeah, and the other, that's a super important point. And as Kathee mentioned, you know, if it's a great game that we see has potential and we see that there are little things that could be done that could take it even further and take it to another level, that's where that feedback comes from. So for the partners that we work with and the developers that we work with on a daily basis, right when they're in the middle of development, we offer to start taking a look at some of the builds past the concept phase. So once they're well into development, we ask to sort of take a look at the builds because we feel like there is a lot of really great feedback. We have a dedicated engineering team that's been making games for decades between all of them. So they have a lot of experience. And you add that to the experience they've had, like shipping hundreds of VR titles, and all of a sudden, you know, there's a lot of value there. So a lot of the feedback that comes is all coming from that place. Ultimately, we don't want to dictate what kind of game you make, but everything that, at least from our side, we will share with you will be a reflection of the things that we have seen do really well on the platform, as you mentioned.
Yeah, don't accept stuff being forced on you, but also don't get offended because somebody tries to help you to improve your game because you think you're the artist and you know better. Like a lot of companies released a lot of games and we made a lot of mistakes in the games that we published, and we learned from those mistakes. So try to learn from that as well.
I also share a frustration with the person who sent you this quote. And why do some developers want to do the marketing for us sometimes? And so scratching a little bit, it seems a frustrated comment by that person. Scratching, I think, and also applies to like other situations, like, for example, management and board. Why does the board want to run the company, or the chairman wants to run? So I think it's, if I had to take a bet, my bet would be that there was miscommunication, mismanagement of the relationship between that person and the publisher. I mean, any half reasonable publisher, if they were to like enforce design or development direction, they would be developers. Why are they being publishers? Having said that, as publishers, we do give opinions, and based on data we process hundreds of titles a month, incoming, sometimes with metrics, sometimes pre-launch. So those with metrics, we study them well, we benchmark. So we have opinions on design, but we don't enforce it. What we try to harmonize across the development and the publishing team are the KPIs priorities. So right now, we're working on, let's say, 7-day retention. Or right now, we're working on conversion. We think we've seen other games where such and such system or features improved conversion, improved that objective, that KPI objective we're working on right now. So we believe it might work. This is some data for you, documentation, a help section for you. But eventually what features, what design you do to hit that KPI objectives up to the developer. Otherwise we would be the developer.
Yeah, I think part of growing as an entrepreneur is understanding how to filter feedback. You have to be receptive to it so that you can listen and make sure that you're not just dismissing everything that you get, because you may get some good gems in there from people that have a lot of experience in certain areas, but you don't have to enforce or implement everything that you get. This goes for development of the game to pitching publishers to pitching investors. It kind of universally applies. So being able to filter the feedback you get and implement the ones that fit your vision while still being open to ones that may enhance it, I think is a really important thing to do.
In terms of a professional relationship between developers and publishers, what do you think is the most important factor?
Transparency is really important. That's pretty much it.
Just being honest up front and with each other. Like, one of the reasons why, and I harken back to this, at least in VR, like it's such a new platform and such a new medium that I think having these conversations earlier on is key. It's super important. Also setting the right expectations as developers, and also knowing what your goal is. Like, what do you want to reach? Like, do you want to make money? Like, do you want to break even? Are you trying to do some research into some new area and see if it works for you? And I think for that to work, we have to be honest with each other from the very beginning, right? So it's our job to sort of like, you know, my group to sort of help and bring you as much information as we can based on what your goals and what your expectations are, at least from our side. So honesty, right, goes both ways. So,
yeah. I think that's the reply. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question, another quote. So I've launched my game. What can I do next? And where else can I launch my game?
Well, I know this one service, and it's called Jump, and it's a subscription service. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things, and I think it depends on the type of game that you have. I'll speak to the premium side because that's my world, but there's been so many different ways to distribute your game popping up, whether it's moving to different platforms, whether it's doing a Humble Bundle or any of the other bundles that are out there, Steam sales, things like that, but they're all getting increasingly difficult to be found. Discoverability has become a huge issue. So from our perspective, one of the things that we like to do is try to bring games to our service at the right time in their life cycle. So whether it's at the very end of their sales cycle as a very short story-driven game where on a service like ours that pays out on playtime, they might only make 50 cents or $1 from a user, but if it's at the end of their life cycle, then they're going to make money that they weren't going to make from sales because somebody probably wasn't going to buy the game, but maybe they'll now play it since it's part of a service like ours. On the flip side, if it's a game with a ton of replayability, like a MOBA or a roguelike, something like that, you can explore a lot more options because you'll generate revenue based on whether it's just free to play with additions or time-based services like ours or bundles where you're selling it out to a bunch of people to get a ton of users into it. It's heavily going to depend on the game, but it's always rapidly changing. I'd say just try to stay in tune with what's happening and make sure that you find ways to get your game discovered.
Yeah, I think life cycle is a super important word. Know where you are in the life cycle of your product. Don't do things like humble bundles too early because there's a risk involved in all of these things. Even like big sales, yes, it can be great to have this push on discoverability if you're like on the Steam storefront page. That's great, but if you discount your game by a lot, that is for premium games. That is the price your game will have from that point on. It's like that is the perceived value of that game going forward. So be careful about that.
Yeah, we talked to one developer in particular that gave away 1 million copies of their game just to get a bunch of people to play it. It was part of a promotion that they did, and now they're struggling to make any revenue because most people that were interested in it picked up a free copy when they did that. So be very, very careful in how you measure the value of your game as it goes through its life cycle.
And keys get resold. It's like if you give away, it's not just fans that take those keys, it's people, like even if you do say Kickstarter and you have keys at 50% off, people will buy that game if they believe in that as on a business level just to resell those keys later.
Yeah, and I know I said earlier that we support from like concept to launch, but it's actually even beyond that. Like our team works with all of you to sort of like help figure out all things related to strategy and to launch, going from pricing to assets to product description pages. But to answer the question, like once you launch, it's not over there. We continue to work with you after that. So if you have content coming out, or maybe you're adding a new feature, those are all opportunities where we can all work together with you to sort of like resurface your content and sort of help get more of the new users in and sort of give them an opportunity to discover your content as well. So.
Thank you for joining us during this panel. Hope it was useful for you. Yeah.